So that is how we are going to kick things off, Brian. There was a couple of news and notes that he dropped in the press conference that was actually audible.
Oh my God, that was the worst press conference I've ever heard. And it has nothing to do with what Brian Kelly said.
I turned it off.
I don't know who the heck is running the Zoom thing, but that person needs to be like removed from Zoom duties further. There was like some delay where like Kelly was talking, and then there was like some 30-second delay that he was talking what he had just said, and it was like they were both going at the same volume at the same time. And when it's the
same person talking, you can't.
I felt like I was going to have a stroke. Like my head felt like it was going to explode. So I was trying to read his lips. Yes. And hear the things that his lips were saying. It was awful. So
horrible.
We were able to decipher a few things, and here's what we'll discuss today. Number one, Vince, as you referred to, Jordan Botelho is back on the 2 deep. Brian Kelly said they'll find out tomorrow if he's able to go this weekend. So we're going to kind of recap everything that we know about that situation and how we got here, basically.
Right.
So we'll talk about that. It was interesting. A lot of people are asking about Prince Collie being on the 2 deep, even though Brian Kelly said he's not available, which is why I've always said I don't put a lot into the 2 deeps.
Yeah, right.
But Prince Collie is on the 2 deep. He will not be available this weekend. He is still dealing with, and that's according to Brian Kelly. That's not a source. That's anything we have. That's according to Brian Kelly. He will not be available this weekend. Neither will Sebo. We won't see Sebo for 2 more games. He won't be available till the Cincinnati game.
We know that, yeah.
Right, and so. And then of course he had some conversation about the interior of the offensive line, and it was an interesting press conference. The questions about the offensive line were kind of funny, and when people on the outside are asking about the outside noise, it's just kind of like. You're not on the staff, right? You're not part of the Notre Dame team, right?
The only noise.
You are the outside. Your job is to create noise. It's called covering the team objectively and honestly, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Outside noise.
Yeah, outside noise. When outsiders are asking about outside noise, that was always interesting. So, but anyway, so let's kind of just jump right into the Jordan Botelho news. So, Brian Kelly,
Jordan Botelho they are pending a decision to be made tomorrow, if I understood the double speaking Brian Kelly, literally double speak. It was his voice twice.
Yeah. If you didn't listen to the press conference, it was really just like and it had nothing to do. That's not a shot at Brian Kelly.
No,
it was
it's not.
We're trying to. Imagine if you have 2 people reading from a script. One guy comes in and starts reading, and then 30 seconds later, the other guy starts reading from the beginning, and they're both going at the same time. That's what was happening in today. But it was just Brian Kelly.
But it was just Brian Kelly. If it was two different,
so weird.
If it was 2 different voices, you could differentiate which one you're trying to listen to. But when it's the same voice saying, it was really difficult. So that's what I meant by double speak, not the way he was saying it.
Right.
But Jordan Botelho, there's a chance that he could play on Saturday, and I think that would be a huge boost to this Notre Dame defense, Brian. I mean, from many levels. Look, he's disruptive. He brings high energy, and he is probably one of the best, if not the best, arguably straight speed pass rusher.
I don't know if it's arguable.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I get what because like Isaiah Foskey, Isaiah's not a speed rusher.
Yeah,
Isaiah's a power player who has speed, but his Jordan's just I'm going to explode beach off the line. It would be a huge addition, and it's been kind of a weird journey to get here, Vince. We found out, we were told this summer that he was away from the team for a little while because there was an eligibility issue. Is what we were told. So we're going to kind of give a little backstory now. This is what we were told. Now that he's back, we can kind of talk about it.
Right.
And at the time, we were told he was away from the team, and it was something that could be season ending. Okay. So we didn't report on it because there was, Notre Dame wouldn't confirm, and they were denying certain things. I heard it from several sources very close to the program.
Right.
I have no doubt that was the team felt at the time that there was uncertainty about his thing, but it was something that he didn't do anything necessarily wrong that he knew of. He didn't do anything he wasn't doing drugs. It wasn't grades. It wasn't anything that he necessarily did wrong from what we were told. It just sometimes things happen.
Right.
And there was an appeal process. And this is kind of how the appeal process is taken out. So
Sure.
a week ago, we were told he may still be out for the year, could be 4 games. There was someone on our message board, however, last week that said that he heard from his good sources that he was going to be back a lot sooner. And this would definitely be sooner. So props to that person for that, because I got a lot more certainty about Jordan Botelho before the season than I got during the season.
Right.
From
it's
sources.
Been very hush hush, and it's been very interesting.
Yeah, and just like pretending like it didn't happen.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And then the fact that he went from, second team to third team.
People were talking about how he should be playing over Isaiah Foskey in the spring, to where he's just buried on the third team and not even on kickoff, not on nothing.
Right. And that's another point, by the way. You just said, not many on kickoff. He is an exceptional special teams player, especially on the coverage teams. And special teams have struggled, in my opinion. So adding him to that as well is a huge upgrade at some spots.
I hope that we see him.
Me too.
I hope that we also are able to see. Here's the sort of the domino effect of Jordan Botelho being back as soon as he's back to being able to actually go and play full speed.
Right.
And I don't know if that's going to be this weekend or if it's in the future. I just don't know. The number one, as you mentioned, the speed rush aspect. I can't wait to see him turned loose on third down.
Right.
I hope that we see him and Isaiah Foskey on the field together at the same time. I hope that we see those two plus Justin Ademiyola at times. Whereas right now on nickel, a lot of times we're seeing Jason Ademiyola, Myron Tagovailoa, sometimes Kurt Hinish, sometimes Justin Ademiyola and Foskey. I would like to see both Ademiolas or maybe just Jason, depending on what the rotation is. I want to see Foskey and Botelho. And then the fourth guy can be whatever combination of people you want.
Sure.
Those guys have to be on the field together. I also think I'm sorry, go ahead, Vince. You were going to
I'd like to see Myron move inside on third down.
They were doing that because
you know what I mean?
Jason outside.
Right.
My point is there were times they were like
Jason
2 to 3 tackle type bodies in nickel. Like remember that long touchdown against Florida State? I want to see more speed on nickel.
Exactly.
Especially on third, medium, and long in the nickel. And that's why Foskey, Jason Ademiyola, and Botelho need to be on there, and then the fourth guy can be, whoever you want at that point in time. It can be Justin, it can be Myron, or a combination of those other guys, right?
Absolutely.
The other thing it does is it allows you to hopefully play Justin Ademiyola some at big end as well now too.
Right.
Now Justin can play both positions, and that adds even – Nana's done a good job, but he's not where Justin is yet as a big end.
Correct.
And now you have someone that's not just going to be able to spell Myron at big end, but someone who can actually, give you the same caliber reps that you're getting from Myron at big end in Justin Ademiyola. I think that also is going to eliminate if Justin's at big end, it's that dropping stuff that he's been doing that I don't really like him doing as much is not a part of his game as much either.
Correct.
And Jordan Botelho can do that. He was a linebacker in college or in high school. That's the final piece. If they want to do some of that 3-3 stuff, with a Viper, you now have the ability to do that with Botelho playing that position, and you can keep Foskey up front.
Yes, and I would love that.
That's where I could see that nickel look, that 3-down look being effective, because Foskey's not that guy. Botelho played linebacker. He knows how to block, destruct. He knows how to scrape and flow and read and react and do all those things at the second level. He did that in high school. He was really good at it.
Right.
And he also would come off the edge, right? So if he's back to the guy we saw in the spring, if he's able to kind of be fully into the rotation, I don't know if it's going to be this week or the week after. So we're not necessarily talking about what we're going to see this weekend.
Sure.
It's more of once Jordan Botelho is back and he's able to go, that's what we're going to see.
Yeah.
And I think it makes this defensive line, which has been pretty good the first 2 games, even better. So that's certainly a big thing in my opinion.
Anything they can do to bring Foskey off of that second level, I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I think Foskey's way more impactful to this defense when he's up front. And you're right. Jordan Botelho can play in space. And I think that's where, outside of the pass rush, that's where he can really affect this defense in a positive way. So, he adds just another element to this team that they're lacking right now. And it allows other guys to stay where they're really good, as opposed to kind of spreading them out. And I don't mean literally spreading them out, but like spreading out the responsibilities more than maybe we'd like to see, if that makes sense. So we got a couple of super chats, Brian, I want to hit here before we move on to the next topic. Mark Grismanich says, have you heard anything behind the scenes to give you confidence that Saturday's O-line performance will lead to Kelly holding Quinn more accountable?
No, I haven't, but it's also too soon for that. And there were some comments about, Brian Kelly making excuses for the offensive line and stuff like that. That was always going to happen. That's just how Brian Kelly is. I don't like it. I think he is willing to challenge other parts of the team, but not that one right now for some strange reason.
Right.
But I also don't think that Brian Kelly has blinders on and thinking the offensive line played phenomenal on Saturday.
There's no way.
I don't think he does.
He's been a coach for too long.
He may not think that Jeff Quinn's the problem that you and I, he doesn't think Jeff Quinn's the problem that you and I think Jeff Quinn is as a coach, but he also doesn't think Saturday's performance was phenomenal.
Right.
That's just coach speak. In regards to him holding people accountable, I kept waiting for that to happen during the Van Gorder era. I kept saying, this is going to be the game that gets Brian Kelly to tell Brian Van Gorder enough is enough, and it just never happened until he fired him. And he's not firing Jeff Quinn because he didn't fire Brian Van Gorder because Brian Van Gorder wasn't doing a good job coordinating the defense. There was a lot of reasons beyond that led to Brian Van Gorder's termination.
Right. He was getting pressure. That wasn't.
He was getting pressured. There was going to be a mutiny in the locker room. I mean, it was right. And that's the thing is, you'll never have that with Jeff Quinn because Jeff Quinn is a very nice, likable man.
He's a great guy.
That's another thing that makes it way different. You're not going to have this revolt within the team because of him.
Exactly.
Now there are guys that may say, "Hey, look, he ain't getting it done," but that's a different deal.
Absolutely.
So
we got one more super chat, Brian. Oh, did you have another?
Is
comment?
It regarding the offensive line? Because I want to finish this. Because I want to finish. I want to finish Mark's point about the offensive line. So right now, Mark, honestly, I'm not going to have confidence in that. I'm not going to have. There's no sources at this point in time of the year are going to come to me and tell me that Kelly ripped Quinn. It's just I'm not going to get that info. I'm just warning you now. It's going to be let's see how it goes on Saturday. Now I'm going to talk to sources as much as I can to find out, hey, was Rocco getting more 1 reps this week or whatever the case may be. But one of the things that we heard from Brian Kelly was he said we're playing the right 5 guys. That's what he said. That could be coach speak, and I also kind of expect that on a Monday. Has he had a chance to sit down with players and let Rocco know he's going to play more, so-and-so know he's going to he did say, now, could there be a rotation? Sure. So that did give me some pause that they know that what we saw wasn't good enough because he's talking about a rotation. If he thought that Saturday was fine and they just got to coach a little better, he wouldn't have talked about a rotation.
Right.
In my opinion. Just knowing Brian Kelly the way that we do. I think he knows that, hey, look, some dudes need to be held accountable, and they're going to, and again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's 2 games in. It's time to say, Zeke Correll, your career guard is over.
Right.
Maybe a rotation with Rocco helps Zeke get his game where it needs to go. Maybe it helps Caden Madden get his game where it needs to go. But right now, both of those guards, to me, are on notice. And I would absolutely get, whether it's Rocco, Christophic, Dirksen, whoever, I'd get him ready. I'd put Carmody in there and let him maybe do that if he's healthy. And he was listed as the number 1 left tackle. I believe Brian Kelly was talking about him when he said they need to test the ankle and see how it goes, but it seems like it's better than they thought. It was kind of hard. I thought that's who he was talking about. I'm sure it was,
Vince, because I know it was an ankle that took him out.
That double talk thing was difficult but I believe he was talking about Carmody. So if I'm wrong about that, please understand it's a little bit of a different situation. Because I think he was talking about Carmody, and so it sounds like he should be okay. But Carmody wasn't playing very well in the first half, and honestly, I thought Tosh had some better pass game moments in the second half than Carmody did. But then they both had their big mistakes in there. So
no doubt,
it was a mess. And now we can transition over to that other one.
Cool, dude. Cool. Oh, you already got it. All right, cool. Brandon Bauer, thank you for the super chat. Brandon, he says, do you see a QB rotation like Golson, Breeze? Reese. Wow. Reese in 12 for Buckner Cone. I see. I don't necessarily think it'll be a quote unquote rotation, and it's not going to be a situation where Cone plays and then Buckner comes in as the closer, because that was more kind of the situation in 12, wasn't it? Like Reese would kind of close out games. At times,
and if Like he came in against Michigan because Golson was really struggling.
Yeah.
And then other times he came into, Purdue to close, to lead them on that final drive
Right.
against Purdue. And
it'll be different. We'll see both, but it's not going to be.
The difference is because Reese was the veteran, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you could,
this is reverse.
Everett got hurt against Stanford, and Reese came in and played the overtime. Played late in the fourth, through the touchdown pass in the overtime. And then, of course, when Everett got knocked out after the Oklahoma game, Reese came in and started against BYU. But I think the spirit of the question is not specifically how those two went. I'm going to take the spirit of the question, just in regards to sort of a rotation. I think what it's going to be is what you and I have been talking about all summer. Is Tyler Buchner is too dynamic not to do something. You have to give him enough snaps, and this isn't about. And I know this is going to be the storyline all year. I get it. I understand. And I'm okay with it because as long as people are talking about Tyler Buchner needs to start, it means that Tyler Buchner's playing well when he gets in there. So if that storyline continues all year, okay, that's fine. But to me, I think Jack knows this was going to happen. This is always going to be the case. From what I'm told, this has been something they've been looking into and talking about for the whole camp almost. Now, I've been told that Tyler, we reported at Irish Breakdown that, on our message board on one of our summer intel features that Tyler Buchner was pushing for the number 2 job. That's how good he was playing this fall camp. And he's a very dynamic player with a completely different skill set than the other quarterbacks. And you have to take advantage of that. And that's what they're doing. And you want to talk about a QB rotation that this is, I think, going to be like, it's going to look a lot like 2006. And it's not Notre Dame in 2006. It's Florida.
Yep.
Chris Leak was the starter. Fans all year were clamoring for Tebow, and Urban Meyer stuck to his guns about what the role was going to be for Tim Tebow.
Yep.
And it was not as pushed. Chris Leak, and this is the thing, you've got to be careful. Because if Jack Cohn doesn't know, Jack, you're our guy. This isn't a thing about if you have a bad game, Tyler's going to come in, because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Jack's got to know this is my team, but we've got a dynamic player just like, hey, look, Kyron Williams is an All-American last year. He comes off the field, right? Michael Mayer is the best tight end in the country. He's going to come off the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes, right? Kyle Hamilton's you're going to come off field sometimes simply because it's a way for us to put pressure on defenses and to get a dynamic playmaker in the game. This is still your team, okay? If it's fourth quarter, it's still going to be it's going to be your ball, okay? Right. And I think that he needs to know that. Tyler needs to know that because it's going to take pressure off both of them. And it allows them to both go out there and play their game. Because if this football team's going to keep winning games, they're going to need both of those guys playing their clearly defined roles. Jack is the starter. Tyler is the dynamic change of pace guy, which is exactly what they did at Florida in 2006.
Yeah.
And I think it's exactly what Notre Dame needs to do. And they need Jack Cohn playing at his best this season because the moment Tyler Buchner becomes the full-time quarterback is the moment teams can develop their entire game plan around him. And that's not what you want. It's not what you want.
You have to play, as a defense, you have to play Tyler Buchner differently than you play Jack Cohn. Period. End of discussion. And so when you have both of them playing, you have to prepare for both of them. And that adds to what a defensive coordinator has to do. And again, you and I have been calling this all summer long, and they're doing exactly if game 2 is any indication of what they're going to be planning on doing moving forward, this is exactly what we wanted to see. It's a package. They didn't run anything exotic when he was in there. I mean, it was a zone read package with some pass plays off of it, things of that nature. And you can expand that a little bit as you move forward, but it keeps the defense on its heels. And that's exactly what you want to do. And I think it's fantastic. He brings a different element to the game than Jack Cohn does, right? But I still don't want Tyler Buchner in there when the game's on the line on the last drive. That's where Jack Cohn is. And that's exactly how it played out, right? So I think right now, that's exactly what I want to see. Now, you mentioned last night that if Tyler starts showing in practice that he can make all of those throws and he can
and make all the reads.
I was going to say, be mentally in the game the way he needs to be as the starter, then okay, that's fine.
At a higher level than Jack Cohn.
Yes,
right now.
It needs to be higher than him. Now, do I have faith in Tyler Buchner in the future that he's going to be able to be that guy? Yeah, I do. But not yet.
Guys, look, Tim Tebow was one of the greatest quarterbacks of this generation, right? Guy played for won 2 national championships. One is the rotation guy, and won a Heisman Trophy as a sophomore. Right. Won a national championship as a junior. Led Florida to a 13-1 record as a as a senior, was one of the winningest quarterbacks all time, set a rushing record at the University of Florida or the SEC for rushing touchdowns, and he couldn't beat out Chris Leak as a freshman, right? Because there's value to having that veteran player that can execute the whole aspects. Because again, if you put Tyler Buchner in there and he can't run the whole offense the way Jack Cohn can, then you've now diminished Michael Mayer and Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey.
And you've got some dudes that,
right.
Yep.
Right. And so, I mean, look, Tim Tebow in 2006 threw 33 passes and 5 touchdowns. He was also Florida's number 2 rusher that year with 469 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's the kind of role, and that's why I've been talking about this Tim Tebow type role all summer, because Buchner has a similar type of skill set. He's a different type of runner than Tim Tebow. He's not a 240-pound linebacker.
He's not running you over, but he'll run by you.
That dynamic running ability in a different form, but similar role.
Yeah.
And so that's what I hope we see this season. And I know people are going to be clamoring for Buchner to be the guy and all that kind of stuff. And if that time comes, great. I mean, look, we're high on Tyler Buchner, but we also understand that 99% of freshmen aren't Trevor Lawrence.
Right, exactly.
And I don't think that the offensive line being bad is enough reason to just completely blow up your whole thing. It's get the offensive line right. There's things you can do with Jack Cohn in the game that can also protect the offensive line, as we saw in the second half against Florida State, as we saw at times in the game on Saturday. So the line has to get better, but it is just. Yeah. Sorry, that with what I had to deal with the Brian Kelly press conference, every time that buzzer goes off in the background of your thing, I feel like I'm about to start twitching. It's driving me crazy.
Like Pavlov's dog.
Mute yourself when you're not talking. The bell's going to drive me crazy.
I know, right? I try to keep an eye on the time. I've tried to do better at that, but I missed it all 3 times.
Is that like, hey, yard time is over? I mean, is that everybody back to their cells?
Pretty much.
All time's over?
Pretty much, yeah. That means lunch is over and we're going into prep period for me. So, anyway.
Rouse Productions also had a super chat, Vince. He said the QB changeup is what needs to happen for now because of our offensive line, not because of defenses. Buckner's mobility may outweigh experience eventually. Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. First of all, I thank you for your super chat, but it sounds like he's saying that Buchner needs to be the guy. And I don't think that because, again, if the offensive line stinks, his mobility can only do so much. Everybody thinks that the only way to beat a bad offensive or to overcome a bad offensive line is with your legs. That's not accurate. There are things that they can do. If Tommy Rees knew that the offensive line was going to play as poorly as it did on Saturday, he'd have had a different game plan for Jack Cohn. And he'll have a different game plan for Jack Cohn moving forward. They're going to have to alter their game plan to be prepared for the offensive line to play that poorly. He's going to have to do that. And hopefully he's a smart enough guy, and I think he is. And hopefully there's enough experience around him with John McNulty and Lance Taylor to say, hey, look, we've got to have a plan in case our offensive line starts getting whooped like that. And that plan can include Tyler Buchner as a change of pace guy, but it has to include Jack Cohn as part of that process too.
Absolutely.
And you don't just ignore what he did in the opener. You don't just ignore what he did on the first series. Look, his first big throw of the game was that 28-yard throw to Michael Mayer. He got drilled on that play, right? So Jack can still make plays when the pressure is coming. And I think that people need to understand there are things Tommy Rees can and should go to that he can do to negate some of this that don't just include Tyler Buchner being the only answer. And if Tyler Buchner's your only answer, eventually, here's the deal, guys. Eventually, people are going to figure out what Tyler Buchner can or can't do.
Right.
Once we got to not fall in love with the backup quarterback syndrome. I've pointed this out before for decades in the NFL. Guys come in for 2-3 games. They put up good numbers. Matt Castle, remember him?
Yeah.
Scott Mitchell, Johnson, who you were talking about the other day, not Doug Johnson. Yeah. Was it Doug Johnson and Flutie?
Oh, for the Bills? Yeah.
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 He comes off the bench, does some nice things, and all of a sudden everybody thinks he's an NFL quarterback, and the Bills keep waiting for him to become a great NFL quarterback, and he was never that guy.
Nope.
And once you get full film on him. So Jack Cohn's a quarterback. And Tyler Buchner is a weapon you have to use. And I hope that people can come to grips with that being the reality of Notre Dame. And I hope the Notre Dame coaches come to grips with that being the reality. I hope that they don't try to say, hey, look, well, what if we get Tyler in there more? Now you run the risk of not making the offense as efficient as it needs to be when Jack Cohn's in there.
Right.
And that's the danger. And that's the temptation when you have a guy like Tyler Buchner at quarterback is
Sure.
It's an understandable temptation.
We have one question here that kind of goes along with this, so I just want to throw it up here. Jeffrey DeMunk Says, question, why is Tyler Buckner the first guy off the bench when Pine is listed as the number 2? I feel it sends a confusing message to not only Pine, but also to the fans who want the next star to play. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I don't think people understand. Tyler Buckner didn't play because Jack Cohn was struggling, right? Tyler Buckner played because he had a package that was going to be very effective for what happened. If something happens to Jack Cohn, my prediction is that Drew Pine is now going to step into the Jack Cohn role, and Tyler Buckner is going to continue with his. Now it may be expanded, right? The Tyler Buckner role may get expanded, but I still think you're going to see 2 guys. That's how I think it's going to go down, because I think Drew Pine can do a lot of things that Jack Cohn can do, and then you don't have to put it all on Tyler Buckner, and I think that's important.
I think part of this is going to determine when it happens, Vince. If
that's
it were
fair.
to happen.
Yeah.
If it happens now, and to answer Jeff's question, this is something we discussed over the summer as well, Jeff, and it's because it was a unique situation because Tyler Buckner has that unique skill set. Is exactly kind of what Vince said is Tyler knows, Jack knows, Drew knows that Tyler's going in there because he brings a unique skill set. If Drew Pine was the athlete that Tyler Buckner was and the runner that Tyler Buckner was, he probably would have been that guy.
Right.
But he's not. And neither's Jack Cohn and neither's Brendan Clark anymore, and Brendan Clark was always athletic, but he was never the runner. There's a difference between being athletic and fast and being a runner. Tyler is a runner. I mean,
he's a runner.
He can make, as you said, Vince, he can make people miss. He has good vision, all those type of things. So, to me, when you look at this situation, they all knew that this was the role that Tyler was going to have.
Right.
They've been practicing this. Now, the more Tyler plays and the more productive he is running and throwing, and I thought it was really smart for Tommy Rees to have some throwing stuff in there for him.
Oh, yeah.
And the first pass he was going to take was a bomb. And they had a penalty where he got hit, and it was the stutter and go to Braden Lindsay. I loved that. I thought that was awesome. Because, hey, look, you can come and run. I was hoping he could get that throw off. You can come in and load the box, but this kid's going to throw it over your head.
Right.
And the touchdown pass to Chris Tyree makes you think hey, look, you can't just focus on number 12 because we got 25, we got 23, we got 4, we got 0, we got 87. And that's where it becomes such a challenge. And then the next series you come out and you've got to be prepared to handle, Jack Cohn going through the offense and reading things out and all that kind of stuff. I think it makes it really hard on defenses, but I think to Vince's point, had Jack Cohn gone down early in the game, I don't think they would have necessarily thrown Tyler Buckner in to run the offense for the next 3.5 quarters.
Right.
I think it would have been, like you said, Vince, it would have been a Tyler Drew thing, but I think then we would have seen maybe Tyler getting a little bit more.
Right. A bit of an expanded role. I get that. Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point. If you get to game 10 or 11 and it happens, and maybe you've already expanded Tyler's role.
If Tyler keeps doing what he did on Saturday,
right,
it may be by the Wisconsin game. And that's not a shot on Drew. It's just, it's all about how much volume can Tyler take and execute. Because if you only know, let's say you can only execute 10% of the offense at a very high level, you can be a great change-up guy. Because the 10% of what you can do is so unique to what Jack Cohn can do. You become the full-time starting quarterback and you can only execute 50% of the offense, teams are going to figure you out real fast.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be effective. And they're just going to do things where it's okay, Buckner's in the game. Let's just drop 8 and make him beat us as a thrower.
Right.
There's things that they can do. So, there's a lot. I mean, and again, the more you have to face too, the more you have to prepare for. And that's what makes it unique. And Jeff, that's why you can't bring in Drew Pine. Because to Vince's point, Drew Pine does the exact same stuff that Jack Cohn does.
Right.
So there's no preparation changes for those two quarterbacks. You're going to be the same offense with one that you are with the other.
Mm-hmm.
With Tyler Buckner, you have to prepare for something completely different. We have a couple more super chats.
Yeah, we sure do. Oh, okay. I'll grab it. All right.
I didn't know you were down there.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I'm going against what we normally do. So anyway, John A1, thank you, sir, for the super chat. He says, on yesterday's show, IB mentioned the O-line GA getting Tosh Baker ready as a pass blocker, which would be great. How does Notre Dame address guard play?
Hey, Jeff Quinn, do your job.
It's that and competition.
But to me, that's Jeff Quinn doing his job. Right.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
I gave a snarky answer. Vince is going to explain it. Go ahead, Vince.
He needs to he needs to coach aggression. He needs to coach fight in these guys. And part of that to me, and we said this on yesterday's show, I believe, is that I'm opening it up. I'm saying, look, whoever is the meanest, most aggressive SOB is going to be my starting guards, right? In a good way, in a football way, right? That's what I mean. I don't want people taking it the wrong way. That's what and that's coaching. He needs to get in his room and he needs to say, look, our play right now is not good enough. And there, no job is safe. And as Brian alluded to yesterday, of course, Patterson and Lugg are going to be playing. But you say no job is safe. I need guys that are going to go out and fight, and they're going to, do this, and they're going to do that. So who could do it for me? Who's going to be that guy? And you challenge them. You challenge these guys. And that's the job of position coach. He knows his room better than anybody else. He knows how he can push the buttons of everybody in that room. That's what he needs to do. These guys need to be pushed, in my opinion. I don't want to say that they're complacent, but it sure looked like that to me in the game. They're at least playing like they're complacent. And I'm sorry, you'll never have a good offensive line playing complacent. So that's what I would do.
I don't think they played complacent, Vince. I agree. I guess I would say I think they play like they don't know what the heck they're supposed to do.
So they played lost. They
played lost. Yeah, and it can look exactly the same. It's like what we've talked about, and I'm sorry, I keep referencing what we've talked about in the past. It's just one of those things where if you don't know where, it's like, okay, if you go into a dark room, right? You're gonna be kind of like, okay, it's not like pitch black, but it's like really dark. And you're not. It's a new room. You've never really been there before. You're gonna kind of be looking around like you're uncertain of what you're doing. But if it's like that same darkness in your home, you're just gonna right? You know where you're going, right? And because you have experience with sort of that. Okay, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing, even though the circumstance it's a new. And the reason I say dark room is because it's a new opponent. They're going to throw stuff at you that maybe you haven't technically seen, but if you're prepared and coached up the right way, you can handle it. Like I remember one of the offensive linemen telling me one time, they're talking about Harry Heastand, and he was like, he would just throw stuff at us in practice we didn't even see in film. Because he was like, hey, look, they're not, we got to be prepared for everything.
Right.
And if you guys can pick up all the stuff I'm throwing at you in practice, then we're going to be fine picking up whatever they're going to throw at us. And that doesn't happen under Jeff Quinn. That is also a fact.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times it's like, hey, I'm not quite sure what to do here. And I also I think the technique is just terrible. I mean, that's the other thing is teach these guys to play with. You got two short, stocky guards. Teach them to use that short stockiness to their advantage instead of having them stand up all the time and get knocked back. The lack of pad level teaching and the reason I say that, it's across the board. Jarrett Patterson has that problem at times. Josh Lugg has that problem at times. Kane Madden's having that problem more now than he did at Marshall. Zeke Correll's having that problem. That tells me, look, there's something different about the guards this year than there was last year. Well, who was primarily coaching them last year? Wasn't Jeff Quinn.
Right, exactly. It was a guy who's busy putting up 69 points.
Right.
Anyway.
On Morgan State, but still, he's a Tulane.
Right.
I did want to get to a follow-up, Vince.
Yeah.
From Rouse Productions. He followed up on the quarterback thing. So you want to take that one?
He says, what I was saying was the use of the two quarterback system is based on our O-line, not necessarily the defense that we faced. And they will use Buckner more when needing mobility when Cohn's skill set isn't working.
Okay, so he's not. I read your question, Rouse, as the change up, meaning you needed to change what was happening. That's how I took your comment. If it's what you're saying, then yeah, I'm fine with that. But it just can't. We shouldn't be having this conversation, and I guess that's what ticks me off. We should be talking about, well, if the offensive line sucks again, then you got to play Tyler Buckner more because now you're hurting your offense even more. Because you're averaging 345 yards passing per game. Right. And a big part of that is Jack Cohn. And, he threw for 239 on Saturday, had a 37-yard play brought back that went to Avery Davis brought back because of an illegal man downfield. And I gotta look more into that rule because I have uncertainty on that rule because I've heard the rule is you can't be downfield if you're an eligible guy if you're not blocking someone. But Jarrett Patterson just drove the guy 6-7 yards off the ball. I mean, he was blocking him the whole way. So, and I was under the impression that was factored in, but apparently it's not, at least based on the call. I don't know. It's confusing. But, to me, we shouldn't be having this conversation. You should be using Tyler Buchner. You know what it is, Vince? It's like what I say about blitzing. You should be able to use Tyler Buchner because you want to, not because you have to.
Absolutely.
And when and this isn't to your question, because I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. It's more of a frustration with the situation that we have to consider using Tyler Buchner because you have to, because it's not about Jack Cohn's skill set not working. Jack Cohn's skill set works fine. It's about whether or not the offensive line is able to let the offense get into any kind of rhythm. And the reality is that, yes, you can get away with that against Toledo. Wisconsin's not Toledo. Cincinnati's not Toledo. Virginia Tech's not Toledo. You're not going to be able to just roll that Tyler Buchner dice out there every time and expect the same results. Because, again, remember, Toledo had zero film on Tyler Buchner.
And now there's film out there that everybody's going to be
not going to be
studying.
the case anymore.
Right, exactly. They're
And
going
the
to be ready
more
for him.
we get to Cincinnati, there's going to be 3 games of film. When you get to Virginia Tech, there's going to be 4 games of film, and so on and so on. So at the end of the day, and your point's correct, but at the end of the day, I'm not pushing back on you. I'm just making a statement that can't work long term, because at some point in time, the line's going to have to play better, because then it'll become a problem for Tyler Buchner. And teams will find a way to attack the offense with Tyler Buchner in the game.
Mm-hmm. Final not final necessarily, but the last one that we've got to get to. D. Beasy, thank you very much for the super chat. This is too much to ask for our rushing attack to be more like Michigan's.
Isn't that sad? I mean, isn't that sad?
That hurt me to read. I
watched that game I watched after the fact. I watched the Michigan-Washington game, and there's a bunch of linemen that Notre Dame rejected, Zach Zinner and Trevor Keegan, and some of these guys that Notre Dame didn't think were good enough. And, Ryan Hayes, the guy they lost to Michigan, and I'm watching this line that I don't think is super talented, and I'm watching them just bully Washington.
Yeah.
And they're not super talented, but it's a mentality. Shamar Moore has them playing physical football. And I'm thinking that's embarrassing that Michigan is putting that line out there with guys that Notre Dame thought weren't good enough to play there. And they took other guys. And they're looking like that against Washington. And then Notre Dame looks like they look against flipping Toledo.
Right.
And it was frustrating.
Yeah.
Because she's right, Vince. I mean, she's right. It's like if Notre Dame's offensive line looked like Michigan's offensive line right now, Notre Dame would be averaging over 50 points a game.
Absolutely.
It's disgusting. And again, I didn't expect the line to look like 2020, but it should not be this bad. Anyone saying, well, 4-star. No, that's an excuse. This line is playing under where they should be right now. Significantly under.
Search agreeing. Those old linemen wouldn't be as good as if they come to Notre Dame. Honestly.
Isn't that sad? And he's not wrong, Vince.
I know he's not wrong. I know. That's why I put it up there. It's a joke, but it's not a joke.
I think he's being serious.
Yeah, it's not a joke to me.
Yeah. I mean,
because he's right. Yeah. Oh, real quick before we get to Ron's super chat, Michael Johnson says, Brian, it was a bad call. If you're engaged with the defense, it's not illegal man downfield. And he says, part 2, if you're not engaged and 5 yards downfield, that would be a flag.
Right. And you can't go 5 yards downfield, then engage
and then finding somebody.
Right.
It's like you have to.
Right. He was blocking that guy at the line of scrimmage and then drove him off the ball.
That's not illegal.
That's why I didn't think that's what I thought. So I appreciate Michael clearing that up. That's what I thought the rule was. And it's how the rule should be.
Right.
He shouldn't be able to go downfield and hit a linebacker 3-4 yards downfield and then drive that guy, because that's offensive pass interference, basically. Not just down of a man downfield, but you're hitting a guy.
Which Notre Dame did, by the way, with my.
I know. Hey, you know what though? Screw it. I'll take it, because they did that worse than that against Florida State last week. That tight end turned around and blocked the dude as Justin Adamilola as they ran across and ran underneath them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's finally nice that Notre Dame finally got a call. I know,
right?
Right, but that was a terrible sell of the pick play by Michael Mayer on that.
I mean, he literally
laughed on him. And he was like, right? They didn't call it, but I mean, that was a big play that got taken back too. I mean, you had that play too there, and Jack Cohn's numbers look a little bit different. And that was the thing about Saturday that kind of, when I rewatched it, and we didn't really talk about this last night in the upon further review, Vince. That was the thing for me, is there were so many things that if you just clean this, and up, and I'm not even talking about the line. that was one bad officiating call. None of the other stuff was bad officiating. That was the only bad call. I didn't think it was a poorly officiated game other than that, that one call. I thought at the time those pass interferences were bad, and you were like, no, watch, look, he's got his hand on it, and we saw the replay, and you were correct.
Yeah, live, it didn't look bad at all.
Didn't look like it.
I give those refs credit because I can never see that stuff live.
Yeah, and then they got. I mean, look, you see the replay, you're like, hey, they got those calls right. Those are the right calls. But they're just like those little missed opportunities that if you do this, if you do that, you blow this team out, even with the O-line playing poorly. And I guess that's why I'm not as down on this team maybe as some other people, because a lot of the stuff I look at is like what's correctable and what's not.
Sure.
And even if the offensive line doesn't get that much better, there are things that they can do that can overcome that to where they're not going to all of a sudden be like a 8-4 team. They're a 7-5 team. No, they're not. Because if they're going to be a 7-5 team, they'd already have a loss.
Right.
They're not going to lose. They're not going to go 4-5. What's it be 5-5 down the stretch? They're not going to go 5-5 down the stretch. But if they don't make these improvements, they could be 9-3. They could be 8-4 at worst case scenario, and that's not acceptable. This team should have a 10-2 floor, and to me, it's going to come down to the offensive line, because a lot of that other stuff, Vince, is going to get fixed. It's game 1, game 2 problems. And as I watch a lot of the other college football, and this is what the rest of our conversation is going to be about, right? So,
in theory,
yeah. So hey, let's kind of just dive into that now, Vince. Because
we got to get Ron's super chat. We haven't gotten to it. I apologize. Yeah. So Ron, thank you very much for the super chat. He says the O-line looks beyond confused. QB doesn't matter if you can't stop the opposing D-line. Bingo. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Thanks, Ron.
Yep.